The scorching wind whipped dust into Lillian's eyes as she stumbled along the jagged canyon trail, heart hammering in her chest like a runaway drum. Every rock and twisted root threatened to trip her, yet she ran, desperate, driven by a fear she couldn't name. Behind her, the faint rhythm of hoofbeats echoed off the cliffs, growing louder with every heartbeat. The desert sun bore down mercilessly, burning her shoulders and leaving sweat streaked with dirt across her face. She swallowed a scream, choking on the dust, gasping, "Please, someone help me." The canyon ahead narrowed, jagged rocks looming like silent sentinels, shadows stretching long and dark in the late afternoon sun. She had no choice but to keep moving, each step jarring her sore ankles. Then a figure emerged from the haze, suddenly blocking the path ahead. He was impossibly tall, broad-shouldered, his long black hair slicked with sweat and dust. The sunlight gleamed off the tribal jewelry that adorned his chest and arms, and a leather loincloth hung from his waist, leaving his muscular frame bare. A knife glinted in the sun at his belt. Lillian froze, fear stabbing through her veins. His dark eyes bore into hers, unblinking, and she felt an almost magnetic pull toward him, a strange mix of awe and terror. "I can make you safe," he said, voice low and calm, yet carrying over the roar of the canyon wind. Lillian's pulse quickened. Safe? She didn't understand. Who was this man? His skin was bronzed and weathered like the canyon itself, and yet there was a gentleness in his gaze that contradicted his formidable presence. She wanted to flee, but her body refused. "Who are you?" she managed, voice barely above a whisper. "No one you need to fear," he replied, stepping closer, yet keeping a careful distance. His eyes never left hers. "Come with me. There is no danger where I go." The hoofbeats behind her grew louder. She risked a glance over her shoulder and saw dust rising like a cloud from the approaching riders' men she dared not name, but knew all too well the type: cruel, relentless, with no regard for life but their own. Panic surged through her. He held out his hand, not in threat, not in demand, but as an invitation, steady and unyielding. Lillian hesitated, the wind tearing at her skirts, the sun burning her cheeks, the canyon yawning behind her like a trap. And yet, something deep inside told her to trust him, despite every instinct screaming otherwise. With a trembling breath, she took a cautious step forward. His eyes softened, almost imperceptibly, as if approving her choice. He led her through the canyon with a fluid, effortless grace, leaping across rocks and crevices as if the terrain were his own home. Lillian stumbled more than once, scraping her palms on jagged stone, but he never touched her, only guided her with subtle movements. A tilt of his head, a shift in stance. By dusk, they reached a hidden alcove. A small oasis nestled among the cliffs, water shimmering in a shallow pool, and a fire burned low, smoke curling lazily into the twilight sky. He gestured for her to sit on a flat rock near the water's edge. Lillian sank down, exhausted, her chest heaving. "I can make you happy," he said quietly, his eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "But only if you trust me, truly." Lillian swallowed, uncertainty and relief warring in her chest. She had run from fear all her life, but in the presence of this stranger, this warrior, she felt something new, hope, fragile yet persistent, a glimmer of possibility amidst the harsh wilderness. The desert around them was silent now, save for the whisper of the wind and the distant cry of a coyote. Lillian met his gaze again and realized, with a jolt, that the choice she made in the next moments could change everything. Her life, her future. Perhaps even her heart. And as the sun dipped behind the canyon walls, painting the sky in streaks of amber and crimson, Lillian understood she was no longer running. She was crossing a threshold into a world she had never imagined, and it began with him, the mysterious Apache warrior who promised safety and something even more dangerous: possibility. Lillian's legs shook as she sank onto a flat rock near the shimmering oasis, the cool water reflecting the fiery sunset above. She could still feel the dust and jagged stones biting at her skin, but the presence of the Apache warrior beside her brought a strange, grounding calm. He stood a few paces away, muscles flexed beneath bronzed skin, eyes scanning the canyon entrance as if reading the wind itself. Who are you?" she asked again, voice trembling. Her fingers toyed with a frayed strap of her dress, knuckles white with tension. "I am called Taok," he said, his deep voice rolling over the canyon like a low drum. "And you are not safe here." "Not yet." Lillian's stomach twisted. "Safe? I've been running. Running from everything." "From them?" she said, glancing toward the jagged horizon where the faint dust clouds of her pursuers lingered like ghosts. I don't know what to do anymore." He took a step closer, but not threatening, only deliberate, every movement controlled, precise. "Then come with me. I can make you safe. I can give you a life free from fear if you are willing to trust me." Her pulse hammered in her ears. She had never met anyone like him, tall, powerful yet calm, with an intensity that made her chest ache in both fear and fascination. She swallowed hard. "And why would you help me?" Taok's gaze softened just a fraction. "Because you deserve it. Because I have seen too many lives lost to fear. And because there is something in you, something strong that you cannot yet see." The words stirred something deep in Lillian. Strength, hope, a possibility she had long buried beneath worry and survival. She glanced at the oasis, its still water reflecting both the sun and her own uncertain expression. She wanted to believe him, but trust was a fragile, precarious thing. "You don't know me," she whispered. "No," he said, crouching beside her, the firelight flickering across his bronze skin and highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw. "But I can see you, truly see you. And what I see is a woman capable of happiness. If she chooses it." Her throat tightened. Happiness. It was a word she hadn't allowed herself to think in years. Fear had been her constant companion, and now this stranger offered something almost unimaginable: freedom, protection, and a life she hadn't dared imagine. Taok reached toward the shallow pool and dipped his hand in, letting the water ripple over his fingers. "The desert does not forgive weakness," he said, "but it rewards courage. You are here, facing it, and that tells me you are ready." Lillian's gaze followed the motion, mesmerized by the ripple spreading across the water. "Ready for what?" she asked. "To choose," he said simply, eyes locking on hers once more. "To step into a life that may frighten you, but could also bring joy. I offer you that chance, Lillian. But it is your choice, not mine." The canyon seemed to hold its breath, the wind quieting as if waiting for her answer. Lillian thought of the endless days of running, of fear pressing against her chest like a vice. She thought of the hunters, of the relentless pursuit, and the life she had been forced to endure. And then she looked at him, Taok the warrior who had appeared from the shadows, strong, unyielding, yet patient, offering something no one else ever had. Her hand trembled as she reached toward the shallow water, touching it lightly, feeling the coolness seep into her skin. I don't know if I can trust you," she admitted, voice barely audible. "You don't have to know," he said, rising and extending his hand toward her once more. "You only have to choose." For a long moment she hesitated, the canyon stretching endlessly around them, the wind tugging at her hair, the golden light of sunset igniting the cliffs in fiery hues. Then, slowly, cautiously, Lillian placed her hand in his dot. In that instant, something shifted. The fear that had dominated her life for so long felt lighter, as if the weight had been lifted just enough to allow a glimmer of hope. She looked up at Taok, seeing not just a warrior, but a guide, a protector, a man who could help her navigate a world that had always seemed cruel and unyielding. I'll trust you, she whispered, voice trembling but firm. I want to be safe. Taok's lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile, and for the first time, Lillian felt the harsh desert transform not into a prison, but a landscape of possibility. And as the last light of day faded behind the canyon walls, Lillian realized that she had taken her first real step towards something she had never dared imagine. A chance at life, and perhaps a chance at happiness. Morning light filtered through the cottonwood trees, painting golden streaks on Lillian's dirt-streaked face. Her body ached from the climb through the canyon the previous day, but a strange restlessness kept her awake. When she opened her eyes, the oasis was empty, except for the soft ripple of water and the distant cry of a coyote. Then a shadow moved atop a boulder. Taok, the Apache warrior, crouched like a predator surveying the land, muscles flexed beneath his bronzed skin. His long black hair framed a face as sharp as the canyon rocks, and the tribal jewelry glinted in the morning sun. He looked at her, unreadable, silent, as if measuring not just her presence but her spirit. "You must learn," he said finally, his deep voice cutting through the crisp morning air. "The desert does not forgive weakness." Lillian swallowed, sitting up straighter, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Learn what?" she asked, her voice tentative but curious. "How to survive," he said, tossing a small hand-carved bow and a quiver of arrows toward her. "Movement, stealth, awareness. If you depend on others for safety, you will perish. The desert rewards those who are prepared." Her fingers trembled as she picked up the bow. It was light but balanced, perfectly crafted, as if an extension of her own arm. Taok knelt beside her, demonstrating the stance, his taut muscles rippling with every subtle motion. "Watch," he said. He drew the bowstring back with a fluid grace, arrow flying straight into a distant target. The sound of the shaft striking the wooden mark echoed sharply, reverberating off the canyon walls. Lillian's pulse quickened. She had never held a weapon like this in her life. Her hands shook, but she mimicked his stance, drawing the bowstring back. Her first shot missed, clattering against the rock, but Taok only nodded, his dark eyes encouraging rather than critical. "Again," he said. And again. And again. Each attempt sharpened her focus, each arrow teaching her more than words ever could. She began to feel the pull of the wind, the weight of the bow, the rhythm of the desert itself. By midday, sweat ran down her back and her arms trembled from exertion, but something else coursed through her veins, a sense of accomplishment, a flicker of strength she had never known. Taok stepped back, watching her with the faintest trace of a smile. "You have potential," he said, "but strength alone is not enough. You must also learn patience, awareness, and caution. A single misstep could mean your life or mine." She looked up at him, awe and curiosity mingling in her gaze. Why help me like this? I'm just a woman running from a life I don't understand." Taok's eyes softened, glinting with the morning sun. "Because even the strongest must sometimes guide the lost. And because I see in you a fire that cannot be extinguished." As the sun climbed higher, he led her through the canyon, teaching her to move silently across rocks, to read tracks in the sand, to listen to the desert wind. Every lesson was a test, not just of strength, but of trust. And with each step, Lillian felt herself changing. Fear still lingered, but it was no longer the only force guiding her. Courage, she realized, could grow in places she never imagined. That evening, as the sky blazed with streaks of crimson and gold, Taok handed her a small bundle of dried berries and water. "Tomorrow, you will hunt for your own food," he said simply. "You will survive. You will live." Lillian stared at him, heart pounding, a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration curling through her chest. I think I can do this," she whispered. You must, he said, his gaze unwavering. Because no one will protect you forever. But I will teach you. I will guide you. And if you follow, you will learn that safety and even happiness can be claimed by those who dare to reach for it. As darkness fell over the canyon, the firelight flickering over their faces, Lillian realized she was no longer the same woman who had run blindly through the desert just days ago. She was becoming someone stronger, someone capable of surviving and perhaps even thriving in a world that had always seemed cruel, and all of it had begun with him, the Apache warrior named Taok, who had appeared from the shadows and offered her not just safety, but a chance at life truly living for the first time in years. The desert night stretched endlessly, a canvas of stars glittering like shards of glass against the black sky. Lillian lay awake on the cool sand beside the shallow oasis, the faint scent of sage and smoke still clinging to the air from Taok's fire. Her body ached pleasantly from the day's training, muscles sore but alive in a way she had never known. Yet her mind refused rest, looping endlessly around one question: why him? She watched as Taok moved silently around the fire, his muscular frame illuminated by the flickering flames. Each motion, how he adjusted a piece of gear, the way his eyes scanned the surrounding canyon was deliberate, precise, almost like a predator assessing its surroundings. And yet, beneath that fierce exterior, there was something patient, something protective. Finally, unable to contain herself, she spoke, her voice trembling into the night. Taok, why me? Why not leave me to my fate? He paused, turning slowly, the firelight glinting off his tribal jewelry and bronzed skin. For a long moment, he said nothing, as if weighing whether to reveal a truth too heavy for words. Then he knelt beside her, the sand crunching softly under his weight. Because no one deserves to wander alone, he said finally, voice low and steady. And because I see in you a strength that even you cannot yet see. You are capable of more than survival, Lillian. More than fear. You are capable of happiness. Her breath caught. Happiness. The word felt foreign, almost impossible, like a fragile flame trembling against a harsh wind. I don't even remember what that feels like, she admitted, her voice breaking. I've spent so long running, hiding. I forgot what it was to live, not just survive. Taok's gaze softened, the intense edge of his usual vigilance giving way to something almost gentle. Then let me show you, he said quietly. Not through words, not through promises, but through action. The world is harsh, yes. But it can also give you joy if you are willing to claim it. Lillian looked at him, searching his face for deception, for danger, for any reason to doubt. But all she found was sincerity, patience, and a strange kind of warmth that contradicted the wild, untamed aura surrounding him. Why do you care? She asked, whispering, as if the desert itself might hear her confession. Why risk yourself for someone you barely know? He smiled faintly, a rare softness that tugged at something deep in her chest. Because even the strongest need someone to believe in them, he replied. Because guiding the lost is not weakness, it is strength. And because I see in you the spark of someone who can rise above fear, if only she is shown the way. For the first time in years, Lillian felt tears welling in her eyes, not from fear, not from pain, but from the overwhelming realization that someone truly saw her. Not just her frailty or her panic, but the person she had been hiding beneath layers of terror and doubt. I want to believe you, she whispered. But it's hard. I've trusted before, and it's always ended badly. I know, Taok said gently, placing a hand, not forceful, not demanding, but resting lightly near hers on the sand. And I am not asking you to trust blindly, just to see the possibility that you are more than what the world has told you, that you can be more. The night wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of sage, desert sand, and something wild, untamed. Lillian breathed deeply, feeling a fragile sense of hope begin to grow where fear had long dominated. She realized that she was beginning to understand him, and more importantly, she was beginning to understand herself. As the stars shimmered overhead, she reached out and touched his arm lightly, unsure if it was permission or seeking reassurance. I think I want that, she murmured. I want to see it. If you can show me. Taok's eyes glinted in the firelight, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Then you will see, he said softly. But it will not be easy. You must face the world and yourself. Only then will you understand what happiness truly means. Lillian nodded, a mixture of fear and anticipation curling in her chest. For the first time in years, she felt as if a door had opened, one that led not into shadows, but into light, guided by the mysterious warrior who had appeared from nowhere, offering her more than safety, a chance at life, at freedom, at hope. And as the night deepened around them, the desert seemed to hold its breath, watching over the beginning of something fragile, something daring, something wholly new. The sun had barely risen over the canyon when a distant clatter of hooves and voices cut through the morning stillness. Lillian's heart jumped into her throat. She had hoped the desert's vast emptiness would keep them hidden, but some threats had a way of finding even the most secret places. Taok's eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon. Muscles tensed like coiled springs beneath his bronzed skin. His long black hair glimmered in the sunlight, tribal jewelry catching flashes of gold and silver as he shifted his stance. He didn't speak immediately, letting the wind and silence communicate the threat. Lillian, sensing his tension, pressed herself against the sand, trying to remain unseen. They're coming, she whispered, voice trembling. Fear spiked through her veins as she spotted the dust clouds rising in the distance. Bounty hunters, cruel men with no regard for life, chasing her for reasons she barely understood. Taok knelt beside her, his gaze never leaving the horizon. Stay close. Trust me, he said simply, voice calm yet commanding. They will not find us easily, but we must be ready. Lillian's fingers trembled as she clutched the small bow Taok had given her, arrows trembling in her quivering hands. Her mind raced. She had trained for weeks under his guidance, learning stealth, awareness, and precision. Could she truly survive if it came to a fight? Could she protect herself, or would she be helpless once again? The hunters crested the ridge, faces twisted with greed and cruelty. Taok rose slowly, muscles rippling as he drew a long curved knife from his belt. The desert wind tugged at his hair and clothes, making him seem almost larger than life, an unstoppable force sculpted by the wilderness itself. Move, he commanded, his voice a low growl. Lillian followed, crouching low, heart pounding as they descended toward a narrow rock outcrop, using shadows and terrain for cover. The first hunter's shout echoed across the canyon as Taok leapt from rock to rock, a shadow among shadows. Lillian mirrored his movements, bow raised, recalling every lesson he had taught her. Her first arrow flew and struck a hunter's shoulder, eliciting a surprised yelp. The others reacted, shouting, but Taok was already upon them, swift, precise, unstoppable. The clash of fists, knives, and arrows filled the canyon. Dust rose in choking clouds as the hunters struggled to gain ground. Lillian ducked behind a boulder, arrow after arrow finding their mark under Taok's watchful guidance. She could feel adrenaline coursing through her, sharpening her senses, connecting her to the desert, to the warrior who moved like wind and shadow beside her. By midday, the dust had settled. The hunters lay groaning or retreating, broken and humiliated, their greed and cruelty no match for the bond and skill of Lillian and Taok. Lillian stood trembling, sweat and dust coating her face, but a strange exhilaration coursed through her veins. She had faced fear and survived. Taok approached, wiping blood from his forearm but otherwise unharmed. His eyes met hers, intense and unreadable. "You did well," he said quietly, though there was pride beneath his stoicism. "You faced fear, and you fought. That is more than most could do." Lillian shook her head, awe and disbelief mingling in her gaze. You saved me," she whispered, her voice still trembling. "No," he corrected gently. "You saved yourself. I only gave you the chance to see it." She stared at him, the enormity of his words sinking in. The man who had appeared from the shadows, who had guided her, trained her, and protected her, was not just a savior. He was a mirror, showing her the strength she had always possessed but never recognized. The canyon was quiet once more, the echoes of battle fading into the wind. Lillian felt a deep, almost dizzying sense of relief and exhilaration. She was alive, stronger, perhaps even free. And for the first time, she truly believed that her life was no longer dictated by fear alone. Taok stood beside her, muscles relaxed, eyes scanning the horizon once more. "We move forward," he said softly. "The desert is vast, but danger is never far. Remember this day not for the fear, but for the courage you found within yourself." Lillian nodded, gripping her bow tightly. For the first time, she felt not only the fear of the world pressing upon her, but also the exhilaration of survival, of being part of something greater, something alive, dangerous and utterly free. And as the sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the rugged cliffs, Lillian realized that she was no longer just running. She was standing, fighting, and beginning to live side by side with the Apache warrior named Taok, who had shown her that courage, trust, and connection could exist even in the harshest wilderness. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a vast expanse of sun-baked rocks and golden sand, cliffs casting long, jagged shadows that shifted with the late afternoon sun. Lillian stood at the edge of a cliff, her heart hammering in her chest as she stared down at the canyon floor below. The wind tugged at her hair and skirts, carrying the scent of sage, sand, and the faint metallic tang of the day's battle. Beside her, Taok, the Apache warrior, stood tall and imposing, bronzed muscles gleaming, long black hair flowing in the wind, tribal jewelry catching the sunlight. He regarded her silently, expression unreadable, waiting. His dark eyes, however, were filled with a quiet intensity, a reflection of the countless days spent guiding her, training her, and protecting her. "Lillian," he said finally, voice low but firm, "the choice is yours. You can return to the life you once knew constrained, fearful, and uncertain, or you can stay here, with me, in a world that is wild and free. One is safe but empty. The other is uncertain but alive." Her fingers trembled as she clutched the strap of her dress, the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest like a stone. She thought of the bounty hunters, of the fear that had driven her across the desert, of every lonely day she had endured in silence and despair. Then she looked at him, Taok, the warrior who had appeared from nowhere, whose presence was both terrifying and magnetic, who had taught her to fight, to survive, to trust. She began, her voice faltering. "I don't know if I can—" "You can," he interrupted softly, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You already have. You survived the canyon, faced them, learned, and grew. The strength has always been inside you. I only gave you the chance to see it." She swallowed hard, the wind whipping across her face, stirring dust into the air. Memories of the last weeks, the training, the hunting, the whispered conversations by the fire at night flashed through her mind. Each moment had been a test, a lesson, a step towards something she had never imagined. "What if I fail?" she asked, voice barely audible. "You won't," he said simply, "because this is not about perfection. It is about courage. You have already chosen, in every moment you stayed, every step you climbed, every arrow you released. Now you must choose consciously, not out of necessity, but out of desire. Lillian's gaze wandered over the desert below, the jagged cliffs, the hidden oases, the wild horizon. The freedom of the land called to her, raw and untamed, promising a life of danger, adventure, and if she dared, joy. Her heart pounded with excitement and fear intertwined, each pulse a reminder that life could be more than survival. Finally, she turned to Taok, locking eyes with the warrior who had shown her courage she never knew she possessed. I want to be happy," she whispered, tears catching the sunlight. I choose you." A faint smile curved Taok's lips, a rare, almost imperceptible warmth breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. "Then we walk together," he said, voice calm yet filled with promise. "And we will face the world as it comes, side by side." Relief, exhilaration, and a strange, unsteady joy surged through Lillian. The desert, once a place of fear and isolation, now felt like a canvas of endless possibility. The cliffs, the wind, the sun-drenched sand, all of it seemed to exhale with her newfound resolve. Taok extended his hand, and she took it without hesitation. The contact was grounding, solid, and full of unspoken understanding. She felt the power of trust and the exhilaration of choice coursing through her veins. For the first time, she believed not just in survival, but in living fully, fiercely, and freely. As the sun dipped lower, painting the canyon walls in hues of gold and crimson, Lillian realized the desert was no longer a place to flee, but a world to embrace. With Taok by her side, she would face whatever came next, not as a frightened woman, but as someone alive, fearless, and ready for the life she had dared to choose. And as they stood together on the cliff's edge, the wind carrying their laughter and the promise of tomorrow, Lillian understood that her life, once dictated by fear, had transformed into something limitless, a life shared with the Apache warrior who had offered her more than protection, a chance at freedom, adventure, and happiness. The first light of dawn crept over the canyon, brushing the cliffs with soft gold and illuminating the desert in a warm, fragile glow. Lillian stood at the edge of the oasis, her feet sinking slightly into the sand, the water reflecting her anxious yet resolute expression. Today would test everything she had learned, the skills, the trust, the courage. Today, she would face the future she had chosen. Beside her, Taok, the Apache warrior, stood tall, shirtless, his bronzed muscles taut, long black hair flowing in the wind, tribal jewelry glinting in the morning sun. His dark eyes, always intense, held a rare softness as they met hers. For weeks, he had guided her, taught her, and protected her, but today he would step back, letting her confront what had always terrified her, the desert, the unknown, and the lingering threats of the past. "They are close," he said, voice calm but firm. "But you are ready. Trust yourself as much as you trust me." Lillian nodded, heart pounding. She could feel the weight of her bow in her hands, the quiver of arrows against her back, and the pulse of adrenaline racing through her veins. She remembered the days of training, the countless hours learning to move silently, to read the desert wind, to strike with precision. All of it had led to this moment. A distant shout carried across the canyon floor. Dust clouds swirled at the base, signaling the approach of men who had once chased her relentlessly. The bounty hunters, unrelenting and cruel, were returning, unaware that Lillian was no longer the frightened woman they sought. "Move carefully," Taok whispered, stepping back slightly. "This is your fight now." She drew a deep breath, feeling the desert around her, every gust of wind, every rock underfoot, every shadow that shifted in the sunlight. The lessons he had taught her merged with instinct, and suddenly fear was no longer the only force driving her. Confidence surged, steady and sharp. The hunters crested the ridge, their eyes widening at the sight of the pair standing calm and unyielding. Lillian notched an arrow, drawing back the string, her aim steady. Taok moved beside her, not as a protector this time, but as an ally, a partner in the dance of survival. Arrow after arrow found its mark, striking with precision that astonished even her. The hunters faltered, surprised by the skill and poise of the woman they had underestimated. Taok moved with her, his movements fluid, silent, each step complementing hers, each motion a testament to the bond they had forged. The battle was swift. By midday, the last hunter fled, leaving only echoes of their shouts and dust rising in the desert air. Lillian lowered her bow, chest heaving, sweat and sand coating her face, and felt a surge of triumph unlike anything she had ever known. She had faced danger, relied on her strength, and emerged victorious, not just surviving, but thriving. Taok approached, eyes glinting with pride, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You have done more than survive," he said. "You have conquered fear and claimed your own life." Lillian turned to him, gratitude and awe swirling in her gaze. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, though she knew it was more than just his guidance. It was the trust he had instilled, the lessons, the belief in her strength. "You did this," he said firmly. "Every arrow, every step, every choice. I only showed you the path." For the first time, Lillian felt a profound sense of peace. The desert, once a place of terror and isolation, now stretched before her as a world of endless possibilities. The horizon was wide, untamed, and full of life. And she knew that whatever came next, she would face it with courage, determination, and a man who had taught her to trust both herself and the world around her. She stepped closer to Taok, letting her hand rest lightly against his arm. "Then what now?" she asked, voice soft but full of hope. "Now," he said, eyes scanning the desert as the wind tugged at his hair, "we walk forward, together." As they moved toward the sunlit horizon, the cliffs glowing gold and amber behind them, Lillian realized she had truly chosen her path. No longer running from fear, no longer hiding from life, she embraced the future wild, unpredictable, and beautiful. With Taok by her side, she was not just alive. She was free, and as the desert stretched endlessly before them, Lillian smiled, heart light, knowing that happiness was not a distant dream. It was here, in the wind, in the sand, and in the arms of the Apache warrior who had shown her that courage, trust, and love could coexist even in the harshest places.